Hello, greetings students. This is a video that's going to look closely at one of the most beautiful books of the dead um, that we have access to and has been preserved. It's at the British Museum, and as you should know, Book of the Dead is a much later term. It was really comes from the fact that these texts, these very long scrolls, were found in tombs. So they were books with the dead, which is accurate. But these books with the dead were actually books for the dead about life and very much a luminous rebirth into light. So the term that the Egyptians would have used and the deceased person who commissioned the book that is found with the deceased, the Book of the Dead, that person and the culture from which that person comes, that Egyptian, that ancient Egyptian, would have called the book of going forth by day. That is to find a way through a perilous, liminal movement of various threshold moments between life and death and the soul immediately after death. Um, Separating in some sense from the body, which must remain intact for it to exist. Please remember this point. I will be reviewing it again next week when we discuss this in relation to a very different tradition. So we have an intact tomb, a body that's been mummified, a container for the soul. And that soul, we'll call it a soul, is the Ba. That Ba is going to go on a journey. And that journey is the journey of going forth by day. And the journey is one of perils, of of a constant forces attempting to prevent that successful passage into the critical hall of judgment, where another part of the human being, the heart, is judged, the site of moral action of the soul's life, the human being's life. And with a favorable judgment, we'll be looking closely at the kind of iconography of that in just a minute in this beautiful book we're going to look at together. The outcome of that judgment will then allow the soul to become what we call an Ach, an Ach. And the Ach is not so much a part of the human being intrinsically, but a state. One could say, maybe if you're from a Christian or Abrahamic religion, you might say blessed, to suddenly have been weighed favorably and become a being of light, like the sunlight of Ra. Hence the book of going forth by day. Now, the reading that I have recently provided you with that's very accessible and clear has a beautiful section on discussing just how this life of light and the terrain of the world of this soul now, Anak, is characterized. And important is the field of reeds, which we've spoken about partly because of these beautiful illustrations, but it's also about joining with the solar cycle, and with the most foundational gods of Egypt. There's a wide range, as we can imagine, in such a long period of blessed activities that are aligned with the Akh, the soul that has become effective in its kind of eternal validation, and is a creature and a being and an existence of light. And this is very important because we're going to be tracing these ideas of light and the soul and cleanliness and purity and goodness of life across several other great spiritual traditions in the next few weeks. And so I want you to remember that, but I also would like you to remember, very importantly, that for the ancient Egyptians, it's critical that this carapace, this shell of a human body that's been wrapped in resin-coated, tar-like coated linens, often with spells written on them as a mummy, and the interior of their body has been completely cleaned out of wet organs except for the heart and separated. And this idea of preservation of the shell of the physical body um, is crucial for the Akh to continue in its realm. So, and that is something to really meditate on in the evolution of human consciousness and reckoning with the body, life, death, and the soul. So now let us focus closely on this beautiful manuscript in the British Museum, and I'm going to try to explain it to you, and it should relate to your readings for the past 2 weeks. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, so what we should be looking at together now, and forgive me, I'm going to be turning away from the camera and to look at the image with you. We're going to now turn to this wonderful image of the of Hunefer's what we call at the British Museum, Hunefer's Book of the Dead is what it's typically called. And so I want to back up and show you here. This is a long, quite long scroll, and it would have been rolled up, and it's a papyrus. And it's read here not the way Egyptians actually read their text, but the narrative here unfolds from left to right. But in the upper registers here, we have some mixing of sequencing, and that's not going to matter in this discussion because we're focusing only on some crucial scenes here and prayers. So the Book of Going Forth by Day has beautiful vignettes. Hunefer here is pictured with his wife, Nasha. And what we are, first of all, going to notice is he was a very well-to-do royal scribe. And to be able to afford such a magnificent text says a lot about his position in Egyptian society. He was referred to as the royal scribe, a scribe of divine offerings, overseer of royal cattle, and steward of King Settle I. He's referred to in some of your course material simply as a priest, which is fair enough. It's a much more general term, and his role was not, as a scribe, was linked deeply to the Egyptian belief system. So now we can look, first of all, at what we're seeing here is a hymn. It's not a spell, it's a song. So we have images and we have many spells, but we also have songs of praise. And this song that we're looking at is the opening hymn to the rising sun. And it's referred to as spell 15, but it's not designed to ward any danger off or in any way create magic in the sense that we'll see elsewhere and power so much as a song to the purpose of this text. Now, what we're looking at here is Ra. That should be evident because of the sun. And this arc here, we can probably understand to be the dome of the sky. And Ra here is in his falcon form with sun over his head. And he's over what perhaps is a body of water, but we have a lot of wonderful use of blue here. Central, we're looking at a very well-known symbol in ancient Egypt of the Djid pillar, which is a symbol of great stability, harmony, and balance. And with the flail and the staff of a pharaoh. We didn't talk much about any of that, but some of you might be curious. And on either side, we have flanking the figure of Ra and it's Ra of the morning sun. So it's the dawn of Ra. And that is the symbolism of Ra here. It's specifically known as Ra Harakati is the particular name. And then we have Isis and her sister Nephthys on either side. And and then these welcoming baboons here, these seven welcoming baboons. Now, this song is a very beautiful song. I will recite a small amount of it, but it's Hail to thee who risest in the horizon, shining forth in thy disk as the king of the gods. Thy rays encompass the lands, all that thou hast created. Thou art Ra, thou reachest the ends of them. Thou subdues them for thy beloved Son. Thou art beautiful to behold when thou risest in the horizon of heaven, and when thou settest in the western horizon, and so on. This is an older translation, and it's, I think, using a kind of older, almost biblical English to give a sense of the sacredness of the hymn. Now, as we continue, we just have an indication of Hunefer and Nasha moving forward through this journey. And I want you to notice as Nasha is holding a long, beautiful branch of papyrus, and she has a lotus in her hair, and she's holding an instrument called a sistrum. And these are really strong signifiers of that she's in a sacred space, in a place of rejuvenation, and papyrus, which flourishes along the Nile and is essential and was essential for so many Egyptian material objects, not to mention associations of fecundity and richness. Here, the instrument she holds is linked to the sound of the lush papyrus shaking in the breeze and has many ritual associations, which we'll learn about elsewhere. Now, this central image is of a god, a very important god further on, and here too, we're looking at the god Thoth, which is god of wisdom. He will be writing down the results of Hunefer's soul. And around him is a long and complex spell that is essentially emphasizing the life. And he's holding a composite emblem, stating it's a basket, meaning Lord of all, every life, power, dominion, and authority. So it's emphasizing the tremendous power of the figure of Thoth here for the future, the afterlife future of the deceased moving through this world. So it's giving gravity, it's reiterating this the power and the hope of this potentiality of a human being to be able to have the breath of life of a god and become essentially one with the gods and not be subject to precisely what Gilgamesh sought to escape. And so Thoth here is Lord of all life and power, all life and dominion. As god of writing and effective speech. Now remember, you must be able to speak in order to have the ability to speak the spells and make one's way through this duat, this underworld. And as you're reading, and the podcast I created for you indicates, one of the ways to gain power over a foe is to know their true name, to call them by their true name. And you can't do that without speech. And so the power of speech and language in the ancient Egyptian cosmology and understanding of how to gain agency over, in a sense, death comes through speech and the voice and the opening of the mouth. Which brings us to we're going to move to a vignette now. Excuse me while this is what I meant when I said it's not exactly in chronological order here. And so I'm moving now we're looking up here at this vignette. A vignette is something on the edge of something else. It's an essence sometimes of an idea. If we're writing a poem, it's a little small meditation. or a small story, a vignette of your life. You could tell a little story about a memory that kind of captures the essence of something that you want to kind of speak about broadly. A vignette in visual art is something typically on a border that's a smaller story that's kind of adding more and elaborating on a bigger story, but there may not be chronologically corrected. So this vignette here is essentially a story of Hunefer's funerary procession and burial rites. So here we see he's on a boat. Here is his mummified body, and he's now moving along to in a very now we have like a comic book. Sorry for the connection. We have a new scene coming soon where the very a bigger here now that very mummy that the mummy and his sarcophagus or mummy case here is beautifully placed upright, and we have the god of embalming, Anubis, a jackal-headed figure holding up the sarcophagus, the mummy case. And we have a ritual here, both of mourning, females mourning and grieving, as we see here as well, hands raised up, signs of grief. But we also have priests engaged in opening the mouth of the mummy. And this relates to another spell that is critical in these Books of the Dead text, and that is one where the mouth is made to be able to speak and to breathe again, even though the physical body is no longer alive. And so that is what we're looking at here. We're also seeing the view of Hunefer's tomb in white with an entry, and then a very large stele, a gravestone in a sense, would not be this large in life. It would be quite small relative to the tomb, but is here made large so that it's possible to read and see what's on it, which is Hunefer now showing devotion to the god of the underworld, Osiris. Now, below, what we're looking at is a sacrifice, which is an important part of Egyptian life and funerary life. We have a sacrifice occurring, and what we see below is the offering of a calf's leg. Here is this little calf, no longer has a leg, and it's going to be placed here on this offering, this kind of altar of offering. Here is the leg repeated amongst other kinds of offerings. And we see a most moving, humanizing understanding of the suffering of what is the mother, perhaps, or witnessing the dismemberment of a calf's leg here. And her expression suggests grief, with her tongue sticking out and her eyes open wide, and here the little calf with its mouth open. And then the offering here. Now we'll move back to what is the heart of this manuscript, and that is what we see here in the Hall of Truth. So after a perilous journey of the soul through the Duat, which you learn about in your reading, the soul successfully has arrived. Here is Hunefer. He is now alone, being brought in, being held by Anubis, walking him in gently. It's a liminal, transitional moment. In order for Hunefer to enter, he has to be connected with his hand held to Anubis, and then Anubis reappears here. And he's setting a plumb weight for the heart of Hunefer, who is now been placed on a balance, a scale, to be weighed against the feather of order, Ma'at. And here is Ma'at, the goddess Ma'at here with a feather in her hair. And then here we have her feather once more. And if the feather, if the heart balances and is not heavier than the feather, then the fate of Hunefer is wonderful. Thoth, the god of writing and wisdom, records a favorable result, and Hunefer then moves into the next magnificent step, escorted by the son of Osiris, Horus, into the court of Osiris. But before we talk about that, let's go up to the vignette above. And even perhaps before that, what we have written above this scene is a prayer that's written, or a spell that's written on a most commonly on the stone, beautiful carved stone scarabs that lay over an Egyptian mummy's heart, and it's spell 30B, which I read in our last lecture video series about the deceased asking the magic of the scarab in this spell, the scarab being so aligned to life and rejuvenation in the sun and Ra, to ensure that even if that soul's life wasn't perfect and even had some mistakes, to be its advocate, to stretch and to allow for an understanding of the why behind an error, and to keep that scale from suddenly letting that feather rise up. And it's a very beautiful spell. And I will just read a bit more. Oh, my heart, my mother, my heart, do not stand as witness, do not oppose me, do not be hostile against me before the keeper of the balance. You are my Ka. So remember, back in the tomb, laying it upon the heart of the otherwise completely disemboweled human body that is just flesh that's been preserved with a kind of tar-like substance and bandage. Inside that is a beautiful sculpture of a scarab, a dung beetle, a large, beautiful insect. It's carved in stone, and on the back is this prayer. That prayer is, you are my Ka, you are my life force, back in connection to my body, are part of me that's laying upon my heart of the world, of the living world. And it goes on, do not speak lies against me. You are distinguished. What is good for us is good for the judge. May the heart stretch. In other words, be happy at the verdict. Do not speak lies. Behold, you are distinguished. So it's begging for the magic of the scarab to protect the heart of Hunefer here. So Hunefer is successful, and he luckily is not consumed. His heart is not the meal of this hybrid monster, Amit, who has a crocodile head, a hippopotamus lower body, and a lion torso. And we find Hunefer now being escorted into this beautiful courtly throne of Osiris by his son Horus. And we can see here Osiris is green, associating him with rejuvenation and life, and his body is encased in white, recalling his mummy status, having been reassembled after having been dismembered, and now dwells as king of the afterlife, or the Duat, or the underworld. None of those are exactly the best translations. And we have a Isis and Nephthys again, and we have four figures here that are standing atop a lotus flower. And I'm not going to name the names of these figures, but they are important to the Ka, in a sense, of back in the tomb. These four figures are typically on the jars that hold the essential organs that have been separated from the body to preserve them from rotting and decaying. The body needs to be, that container for the Ba soul needs to be dried out. So now, once the soul has been judged favorably, the soul meets Osiris, and the soul is a creature of light, has become a creature of light, an Ak. And we don't have, I'm going to move now past these. Remember, these are not in order. We're looking here at some scenes, some of which I don't know their specific meaning, and I've done a little bit of research. Um, um, but these are clearly relating to aspects of the afterlife. And what this beautiful two kind of directional lion symbol and the rising sun here is of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's a suggestion of kind of an eternity of Hunefer entering into this place of light, where time is, in a sense, and light is still encaptured. Yesterday is the lion turned kind of this direction, tomorrow the other way, and then here in the middle is the rising sun going forth by day into light. And other scenes. Now, in your of devotion, of acknowledgement, in your reading, there's a beautiful description of the kinds of activities of the creature of light. But what we have here is the hopes and the realization of the beauty of a soul aligned and emerged with and assumed into the world of the gods. And the gods themselves are born of the understanding of the cycles of rejuvenation and life and death that mark the Egyptians' experience of the natural world and the really dramatic experience of living in a desert where a flooded Nile brings forth enormous fecundity, and the Egyptian need only turn one another direction to see an arid desert. So a tremendous sense um, of high contrast, of dependency on cycles, and the beauty of the rising sun and the flowing waters, and the possibility of the human soul in some profoundly metaphysical way becoming one with that after death. And so I leave you with that, and I hope that this has been helpful to kind of put it all together for you in this unit.